to Vintage Finds, and guess who I found today? I found Jack Griffin,
Hey,
and
folks. I
and
was
and, and we're
getting.
we're experimenting with a new service called Restream, and we were supposed to start about a half an hour, almost an hour ago, but we had some little glitches in trying to figure it out. But anyway, Jack's been patient and hanging in there, and we're going to see how it goes. So Jack, just sort of tell us where you're from and something about what you've been doing recently.
Well, let's see. I'm originally from New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire, but I've lived in many different places. Well, not many, but enough. Philadelphia, the Twin Cities, Troy, New York, either for school or work. Um, and right now, for many years, I've lived in Lebanon, Connecticut, small town which is east of Hartford, Connecticut, with my wife and two sons, my second and third children. My first lives down outside of Louisville, my daughter from a previous marriage. And I'm retired. I worked for the U.S. Navy for 34 years, not as a military person, but as a civil servant. And when I retired, I retired because I really enjoyed my work, but I decided I wanted to do something different with my life. And one of the things that I heard of, which I didn't really know anything about, was improv. So I looked up improv, and there's a theater called CTSEATEA in Hartford, Connecticut, and I said, well, Hartford's not New York or Chicago or whatever, but I'll try it. And I went to one show there, and I liked it, so I signed up for classes. And it turns out Hartford is, in fact, a fabulous community. It's one of the best in the country. And I've been to a lot of them. It's got an excellent theater, great supportive group of people. So I took classes there, and I kept auditioning and finally got on a couple of house teams. One which is called Average Age 50, which I do with my friend Josh Wells, who is, well, between us, we are not exactly average
what's the
age.
average age now?
Pardon me?
I said,
The average age, I'd have to do it in my head. Let's see. I'm 78 and he's 32, I think. So I haven't had my second cup of coffee, so I can't do the average there. But we'll always hold the name Average Age 50 because it's so great.
It is. And so
So 5 years I've been doing improv.
For 5 years. And so that means that almost, but not, you've been doing a significant amount of your improv on online then.
For the last year, I've done quite a bit of improv online. I've done the Vintage Improv Festival twice online. I've done, Josh and I do a lot of practice online. Now we can do it in person, but we did practice online. We did some shows, and the artistic director of the CT Theater built a 3D virtual theater online so we could perform there with avatars. And he also built a virtual set of Vaughn's, which is the bar we hang out in at Hartford. So after a show, we could go virtually hang out at Vaughn's.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
So tell me, so I want to know, because I didn't really get a chance to see you at the festival this year. Mm-hmm. What did you do? What was your festival experience?
Well, I have, since it was a while ago, and I have last in, first out memory or something like that. I did, I have my list of my schedule here for the show. I did Greg Tavares's intensive and show at the end. I did Gary Schwartz's intensive and show at the end. I did can't remember Hildreth.
Oh,
John?
John, yeah, John
John
Hildreth.
Hildreth's intensive and show at the end. I competed in the dual prov. I did Victoria Hogg's Growing Old Gracefully workshop.
You did a lot. How did I not see you?
I don't know. I did a number of, I watched a number of shows, faculty shows. I would switch back and forth between shows, fit them in when my schedule allowed. And last year I was super. I had two computers, so I'd have two shows going at once. But I said that's a little too much. So I was pretty immersed from Wednesday through Sunday.
Yeah. So, and they were all different styles, right? Like you had Spolin and Second City, like John is, and Greg has his own theater that's not, So
Greg was really. I mean, I love them all, and when you say different styles, there's an undercurrent of. I won't say hostility, but tension between Spolin and other people like John Hildreth. I mean,
You mean in our festival or just in?
No. Well, in the intensives.
Really?
If you would ask someone about, hey, what about Spolin?
Really? So
yeah. So they're because both styles, the style John represents, which is like the, I don't know what you'd call it, but the conventional popular theater sketch.
Kind of Second City.
Yeah. Right. They think Spolin is too Spolin.
So
they say it's old hat, and I'm sitting there thinking, hey, Second City is also old hat.
So wait. So in the intensive, there were people dissing other styles. How did you all have time to do that?
It was in the, when we just, they didn't really diss them too much. They just a little bit, like they have their, and I find it wonderful because they have both have their strengths, and they're passionate about their style of improv. But it was kind of fun. It fit in with the political climate of the last year.
Was it the students that were having those discussions?
I usually would prod it by asking a question.
Jack, are you like a controversy poking?
Yes, I was poking.
Something must have stimulated you to do that, though. What stimulated you to do that?
Just because I would come out of a Spolin intensive, and I also did a couple of the other small Spolin things.
With Max Schaefer and his group.
Yeah. I did, two of those. So I'd come out of one of those and I'd ask them, like, what do you think of Spolin?
So you come out of the the smaller ones and go to another class and ask them? Is that what?
Yeah, right. Yeah, because both of them. I mean, Spolin is very strong and very focused on its belief system.
Wait. What does that mean? What does that mean? Spolin is very strong and focused on its belief system. I'm curious about what that means.
I would make and this is not necessarily a negative thing, but I would make them kind of like Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons.
There. Do you feel like
not in terms of Viola Spolin is their Bible,
right?
Their goddess, and then she had like St. Peter or St. Paul or Jonathan Smith or whoever. She has certain advocates,
right? So do you think that comes from? do you think that maybe that comes from some kind of artificial tension that's been set up, or like I
I
found it.
think it comes from I think it comes from two things. I think it comes from a strong belief in what good improv is or should be, and it comes from history of the folks who have grown up in a certain
Uh-huh,
community,
uh-huh.
and they're passionate about it, understandably, and it's much better than they're being limpid about it, you know. And
Right.
then Greg Tavares, for example, is very open minded, but he has his own personal style, and he really believes in that.
Right, which is
And
supposed to not be influenced by anything that they created themselves because they were in isolated in Georgia, right? Georgia, right? So
something like that. Yeah. So his, but there, it's not. I mean, it comes from the passion, which is really good, I
right.
think.
So what I find is interesting because they're all the styles are all beautiful as far as I'm concerned, and they're
Yes,
all
absolutely. They all have something tremendous to
they're
offer.
not like mutually exclusive,
No,
and there probably is. Well, I know there is, and it's totally from the outside because I'm just like as a student at
hmm
Improv Boston, and like I was so excited to move to Boston and get to take this whole curriculum because
right.
where I'd lived before that wasn't available, and so I was like really excited to do that. So the very first class they gave us a book that they
hmm
recommended that we read, and that was one by Keith Johnstone. Okay.
Okay.
So that's like the introduction to improv, and read about Keith Johnstone. He's like the godfather of whatever, improv,
Right.
of whatever. So I got the book, and then I got the chance to go to Calgary and spend 10 days with a group of an international group of people working with him. And it was so mind-blowingly different than
hmm
what was happening in Boston. And Boston is very two chairs, no props, Chicago, like style.
Right.
Um, and so I mean, there were some strangely weird things about it, but there were also, but they were still delightful. Like one of them was, I don't understand. They had a specially made prop bed. It was important to have this bed with all these things where people could pop. And I was like, so they have props. They have a prop room with all kinds of props and costumes, and they direct and they do things differently. And I thought, and they have this thing, this master servant thing, where they have these big long black balloons, and you can't hurt unless you're allergic to latex, but they do like status things with it, which were hilariously fun. And so I came back and I was like, oh my God, I've got all these really neat things that we could like start, because you can submit for different shows
Oh yeah.
and they looked at me and they go, that's not improv.
Oh yeah. I know
And
Boston.
I go, this was the first book you gave me by this guy. And I went there and so it was like, that's not improv. You don't use props in improv,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, they're doing improv and they're using props. And it was the book he told me, so this whole, I couldn't make it make sense in a way. And then I
Right.
just decided, oh, it doesn't have to make sense. People feel really strongly.
Mm.
And when people get to feel really strongly, sometimes they're not necessarily thinking rationally. They're thinking with their heart, which isn't really
Yeah.
thinking, which
Yeah.
isn't necessarily bad, but it's so interesting that, because I, like I find all of the people that were, that were our faculty at the festival are so amazing, and they're so good
Absolutely.
at what they
Yeah.
do and how they get there. And is interesting. So it's interesting to me, like, to see your perspective on it, because you're going to the classes and you're picking up on it,
Yeah.
and all. So the takeaway
I
is
have to say about Boston, because we did your
right.
first vintage improv festival there. I mean,
Yeah,
second.
yeah. The first one was at Improv Boston.
Right.
And then after that, it was in Somerville.
Somerville. But the Boston people, when they had this thing, a little nose in the air, they'd say, well, Hartford tends to be game based. So they all have labels for each.
I know. And the thing is, it's like everything, don't you think? I mean, I think for me, it's like about really being in a place where you explore and get to a set for me. Like, I mean, I'm not looking at it like I'm a, professional, but to have a sense of joy in the moment and feel good about, and that there's so many ways it seems like to get there.
Yeah.
And in history, like it's important to understand what the history is in life. To me, aside from improv, it's important to not become so dogmatic that you can't see other things. And I think that I don't have the sense that any of our teachers are dogmatic, but I think, like you said, they're like very passionate about what they do, and that they have a commitment, especially like in the case of Viola or in the case of Keith or whatever, of keeping that history alive.
Oh yeah. It's very, very important. And the great thing about these different approaches, from my point of view, is you learn and get to practice so many different ways of opening a scene strongly. Which is, to me, is growing to be probably the most important part of improv. No matter what you do, you have to open a scene strongly and leave it open so you don't shut your partner out of a potential. So if you want to do object work or physicality to open a scene and to carry a scene, then Spolin is you got to take a Spolin class. It's just they're entirely focused on that. Not entirely, but yeah. And I don't know. I've had so many workshops and I've read a number of books, and everybody has. You need a gimmick, but you need a certain
book. For the book.
Well, you need what distinguishes one person from all the other famous improvisers. So you need something that is your tag and your approach, and they're all valuable. I mean, they come out of years of experience, and they make people really good teachers.
So what's a memorable moment for you? Something that happened during the festival that really stands out for you this year?
Wow. I'm going to have to think about that one for a minute, because one of the things that stood out for me that I happened by lining up in the intensives and also in workshop, the Growing Old Gracefully. I was in both of them. There was a fellow from India and a fellow from Norway, and they were in several of the intensives and workshops together with me. And I found that, plus a healthy dose of people from Britain, from England.
Didn't you have?
I just find that it's just kind of a sidebar of learning. You're not only learning improv, but you're learning about different cultures. One of the funnier episodes of that was in one of the workshops. The guy and I'm already vaguing on names, but the guy from is it Norway?
Yeah, Alex.
We were supposed to, and it must have been Gary Schwartz's, because it was we had to he wanted us to build something, a common object, act it out. I mean, and he had to do us twice, first time, and then get really into it.
Mm-hmm.
So Alex was doing this very meticulous, detailed object work, and it was very clear that he was hanging something, and most of our guesses was he putting ornaments on a Christmas tree.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But he said no, he had a model ship and he was putting the sails on it.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, everyone in Norway would have recognized instantly what he was doing because it's probably a common hobby there.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but it was that kind of stuff. And the guy in India, it was a
Vishak?
Vishak, yes. It was it was in the middle of some celebration or festival, and the opening, first thing we were in was Greg Tavares's class, and it sounded like there was a revolution going on. I mean, gunfire. Just.
Oh, you mean where he lived? There was
where he lived in India, and it wasn't Greg's. It was doesn't matter. Anyway, he said, no, there's a big celebration. It's an annual festival, which I wrote down and forget. And people are very joyous and they shoot off tons and tons of fireworks, So periodically, all through these workshops and intensives, you hear these explosions, and he couldn't shut it out. There were so many of them. It was like being in the middle of putting yourself right in the ground zero of a 4th of July celebration or something.
Yeah, this year our festival there were a number of people from other countries, which is really awesome, like significantly more than in the past. And hopefully next year we'll have even more. Hopefully next year we'll have a hybrid festival where we'll have people together and also people together online.
But it brings a lot more to the festival than just the improv, because there's cultural stuff. Plus the young woman you had in was wonderful.
Oh, the 17-year-old?
Yeah. I'm curious as to how she got in, because she was very good, very funny.
So it's so interesting because they approached us to participate, and I was like, sure, so from my perspective, vintage is born from the idea that people are often segregated away from opportunity in improv based on their age. And so to overcome that in a number of ways, but the overall need to have that happen is that if people of all ages were willing to improvise with people of all ages and treat them as if they're improvisers, period.
Right.
Then there wouldn't really be a need for vintage other than we just like to hang out together. So certainly a 17-year-old that wants to play with us, I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Like, of course, come play. And it turns out I didn't realize that I actually knew her in real life, because she's really young and people change a lot over a 3 or 4 year period. So when I went to see her pictures, I recognized her from 4 years ago, and I go, oh, because 17 minus 4 is like whatever, 13 or 12. And I was like, oh, I know you. And she was like, yeah, I knew you. And I go, well, this like kind of look a little different. And but yeah, so she's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really fun. And it makes perfect sense, as you say, that the young can be excluded or marginalized as much as older people can be. Although in Victoria Hogg's Growing Old, gracefully on how you're treated as a elderly person in improv, it was kind of surprising that most of our experiences weren't necessarily being marginalized or dissed too much, although their ageism is obviously at work, but how people would tend to try to compensate for it. Sometimes, for example, one person's experience was they never let me play an old person.
Really?
they always they always categorize me as some other age, and in their effort to be PC or something.
Well, that's a change. That would be a change because
Yeah,
that's not my
but
experience.
it's still. I feel that it, and I can see why. Also, a number of reasons. Josh and I did. We have a thing called Show Lab in Hartford once a month. Thank goodness it's going back live, where you can bring something experimental to the stage and just play it out and see how the audience reacts, and then maybe you can refine it and make a show and a regular show out of it. So Josh and I each wrote a sketch, and we we acted in each other. I mean, we were in each other's sketches, and I thought in one of the sketches that I stepped out on stage pretty lively, but Josh, bless his heart, videos all of our stuff, and we love watching our stuff together. We're somewhat unusual. I think we like watching videos of improv. But I watched myself come out on the stage, and I said, Jack, you are really slow moving and hunched over. You look like an old person, and you are an old person, but your image of yourself needs to be adjusted. And I also need to get back to the gym to limber up after all of this COVID stuff. Just because I'm getting physically old, and physically old doesn't always cut it in it, especially in fast moving scenes. So there are the advantage of being old, as we all know, is an incredible amount of experience that you bring to the stage. Disadvantage is you're not so fast necessarily on your feet, and even mentally, especially if you're thrown in the realm of popular culture, which you just forget it.
Well, throw them in the realm of
Oh, I have.
And
Yeah,
70s,
I mentioned that.
and
Yeah, I turned tables once in a show. It might have even been I forget what it was. It wasn't a regular team show, but I started singing the Sloop John B. Kingston Trio, and I mean, the Beach Boys did a version of that, which was very popular. But even that's so old that people in the cast didn't recognize the song.
Right.
So it's fun to do that. But the really good ones don't put in the cultural references.
So something, what you probably said this, but I missed it at the very beginning because I was trying to make sure that we were streaming. And the reason that you first went into improv?
Oh, so I was working in Washington. I mean, for the Navy, but I was down there a lot, and I worked with a contractor who really liked stand-up comedy, and I've often thought of doing stand-up or comedy writing, and so I said, well, we should get together and do some comedy writing or something, And he said, well, I'm taking an improv class, and I said, improv, what's that? I literally. And he said, well, like, whose line is it anyway? And I said, yeah, okay, that kind of stuff. So I said, yeah, maybe that would be fun. And that's how I got into it. Looked up, found CT, went to Hartford, watched one of their shows, which was a game,
And how long ago was that?
Oh, 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago this spring, I think. Yeah.
So you were working with the Navy 5 years ago?
Yeah, I retired. I have to back up in 2016, I think. 2007. Yeah, I worked way after people might retire because I was in my early 70s. I was 73, I think, when I retired. And I was one of those people who worked 24/7. And my wife at one point refused to go on vacation with me if I brought my laptop, just because I would be up late at night or up in the morning working on stuff. And one summer, I mean, I was thinking about retiring, and people were asking me, hey, not, hey, when are you retiring? Get out of here. But if you thought about retiring, it became sort of a joke. So I took 2 weeks off in the summer. And for those 2 weeks, I didn't log into my email 100 times a day. I think I logged in twice and maybe took 2 phone calls. And I started just relaxing. And one day I was taking a walk, and I said to myself, well, Jack, you've always said when are you going to retire? What's going to be your decision? I'm having this internal conversation. And I said to myself, well, you've always said you'll stop work when the job isn't fun anymore. And I said, the job is always going to be fun. And I love it, but I want to do something else. And that was it. That's my decision. I decided to retire and went back and told them when I'd retire. And
so you took a month or a little bit of time off from doing what you normally do, and then so you had a space, and you're like, oh,
yeah, space, yeah.
And that was good. I mean, how long from the time that you decided that until you actually retired? Like,
I decided it in in the summer, and I retired the next spring. So like from July to, I retired on April 30th. I had, in terms of the government, 2 ideal retirement dates. One was December 31st and one was April 30th. And I said, well, who wants to retire in the middle of December and all of a sudden being in the middle of winter, sitting around the house, twiddling your thumbs? So I said, I'll pick April 30th. It turned out December 31st, December was beautiful and warm in the 60s and 70s in Connecticut, and April was down in the 30s.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! So then you started having fun doing something else, not just improv, or mostly improv, or
time-wise, not at first. Mostly, first thing I did was I saw an ad for it's called Master Naturalist courses, and they're equivalent to Master Gardener courses, except you generally learn about stuff in nature, and their goal is to recruit people who can be volunteers to give classes or lead hikes. So I did that. So I've never finished my projects, but I got involved in nature, which I love, but knew nothing about, and still don't know a lot about. And was just exposed to all these people, and we would spend a whole day Saturday in a classroom and out on field trips. And so I did that, and I still, until COVID, until I had to have a hip replaced, I was leading hikes twice a month, just in a local state forest for a couple of hours. Leading the hikes was in name only. I was, most of the people knew more about nature and the trails than I did, but it was fun. And the other thing I did was went back to the gym. Went to the gym. I'd never really been a gym rat at all, and I never did much physical exercise. But I got myself in good shape and healthy, physically healthy. And so those were, I say, the 3 pillars of my retirement were getting in shape, doing the Master Naturalist, and doing improv. And what I found is they all have in common is mindfulness. You have to be very much in the present to do those things. Very different activities, but you have to be there. And I tend to be a person who's not there. I'm always running tapes in my head and stuff.
So what would you like if there were people that were thinking about doing improv, improv online? What would what advice would you give them?
Whoa. For improv online, that's tough because improv online is still tough to do. But I think you just I think I had to learn to stop being so self-conscious about what do I look like on screen. Although as we were saying at the beginning, I'm conscious of where's the light. I've got to
Mhm.
get a light like you have that illuminates my face better. And just relax, because once you get involved, like in this interview, for example, even though it's not improv, well, life is improv. I mean, we're just
Right, right,
we're
right,
not making this up, but we're saying it as we go
right.
along. Just get involved in it, and you start losing the sense that you're on camera.
Uh-huh.
I when I worked for the Navy, I was on a team that put in the first video teleconferencing center in the armed services. I mean, in the Department of Defense,
Uh-huh.
and so I got used to meetings that were remote. Back in the early '80s,
Uh-huh.
and have been in them ever since. So I'm comfortable with that. But you have to do that, um, and get familiar with the technology, basically familiar, so that you're not frozen every time you want to do something. Although I'm kind of noted in improvs or everything when you're supposed to go to the off screen to forget to shut off my image. So, but, and trust people. And that's a thing about any improv. You just have to trust the people you're on stage with, or trust the people you're playing with.
So I have a question. When you're doing the virtual improv, do you ever feel like you're in the same space?
Yes.
So how does that work? Tell me what that experience is like. Like, when do you notice that, or just
Oh, I think it's just getting involved in the scene that you're in. Um, it's nothing conscious that I've done. It's just suddenly, I'm surprised. Like, I can't lean out now and give you a hug.
right,
Whoa, I can't do that, even though I feel like that's the next natural thing,
uh-huh.
or that I can't move into your space. I say, well, if I just go over there, but then I realize I can't go over there. I mean, it's not whoa, it's just a getting so involved in the scene that you forget you're on camera.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I've had that experience fairly often in really good scenes, or
so
just even bad scenes with the right partner. And
so
the
so
other thing
yeah.
I'd suggest to people is to get up and move around, and you can use the space if you set your camera up right to walk around and things, and it just gives you more options for body work or object work. You're not necessarily nailed to the chair. And believe me, as you know, Miki, when you get old and you're at the virtual improv festival and you're sitting in a chair for 2 hours at a time, it's not good for your health.
Is that true? It's not good for your health, or it's just not good for your body because you get up and you're like, oh my
Well,
god.
I found that's the other thing I found, that my health and my body are kind of so intertwined that you're cutting off your circulation. You could even get blood clots from doing that, as you know. I mean, not from personal experience, but as a physician, you know that.
So what uh what would you like to see, um in terms I'm talking about virtual improv. How would you like to see it develop? Because it's going to keep on going, even though, we can get back together, you know,
Right.
physically. What would you like to see develop that would, make it differentiated from being together in person?
I think one of the things, and you've definitely tried to do this, but for some reason people don't use that virtual room you set up. I've gone into it every once in a while, but some opportunities for people just to sit around and get to know each other, chat, because you do have that in
Oh, so that's like at the festival, right? Right. Is that
yeah.
what you're talking about? Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
even at festivals, they get so busy that sometimes you don't have time to explore those things. But
Yeah.
I think there's more time. There's more time when you're in a um, intensive, in a live VIF, to get to know people even during the intensive.
I'm thinking, wouldn't it be like really cool if you could have this setting, like Zoom or Restream or whatever, but that you could connect it to the neighborhood thing where you could just go through a door and you'd have like a little, like, I mean, I know they're breakout rooms, but I don't think the breakout rooms in Zoom are set up so that you can just like go off and choose one or whatever, but something where you could just go and do that and they're connected, as opposed to having to be in a separate separate program or a separate internet space. And it's the other thing that's really, because I agree that in setting up the festival, for sure, I think of like the intensives, if they're multi-day, probably the same thing, but like a short one, like a 3-hour one, I don't know, but something that goes over a longer period of time, that then you do like go out to dinner with people or go out for drinks or do something, together, and that virtually, to try to reconstruct that, number one, people kind of have to buy into it that they want to.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that's a huge thing, because if they don't really want to and you set up the resource, then you don't get it developed because people aren't doing it. So to try to figure out how to get people engaged in that would be a big thing, because that is a piece that's missing, is that sort of social interaction that you would get at something that's live. Although I have to admit, some people are really introverted and they probably would just go back to their hotel room and they wouldn't do something. So it's only a certain group of people that are, that would do that anyway. It's certainly not everybody, but yeah, that time to spend together connecting isn't really, you realize when you're setting up the virtual festival, it's all a house of cards. Like everything is constructed. If you don't make it so that it's available, it won't happen. And if people lose a way to connect, like they don't have their link to get to something, then that also, so there's a whole lot of construction of infrastructure that has to happen with a digital festival. And that recreation of those times together away is a really cool thing. Although I do think, like if you go to a conference and you're out of your you're not in your normal space. Like, okay, so just for example, if there's a festival in Connecticut and you're there, that's your space, you probably behave differently. You probably go home and have your dinner with your family, like, as opposed to if you went to Los Angeles for a festival, then you're totally away from home and everything that you do is related to where you are, because there's no intersecting back with your daily life. So in a way, the stuff that we do virtually, there is more like being in your home community, going to something, than it is being totally away. I don't know, some people maybe can separate those two things. For me, I have to go stay someplace else in order to have, like when we had the festival in Boston, I'll find a place in Cambridge or someplace to stay, so I'm physically away from what's happening.
Right. Yeah.
Any advice to people? Anything to do with improv, anything to do with being a vintage person in improv, anything.
Advice.
There's your chance. You get to like.
Never think, and I think this is probably redundant advice for people who are older and working in improv, but um, always think, what do I want to do when I grow up? It's that classic. You yeah, the people who could really use something like improv to break out of their shells or their slow narrowing down of their view of what's possible in life, they never will take improv. I think I think maybe we need traveling troops that do stuff in senior citizen centers or old age homes or something. Get people involved in that. And just pieces of advice. That's one of the ones I gave, which is not the usual piece of advice I give, but it's one that works very well for improv, and it's basically a joke, but I take it as a life principle, and that's if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. That's that's kind of what bring that to the stage too.
True.
Well, I'm going to go this way in the scene, and all of a sudden you.
Or you don't pay attention and you just do it, and then you're running over. You're not in the moment anymore.
Yeah.
Right? You just got the. So, well, I really appreciate you being patient with this testing Restream here today. And, I'm going to look and see all the channels that we're posted on. We're posted on my Facebook page. We're posted on the festival group page. We're on Twitch and on Twitter and on, let's see, oh my gosh, we're
Instagram. We must be on Instagram.
We're probably on Instagram. We're on these services I never heard of before, streaming through Europe and Asia. So we'll see. we'll see if it really worked. So thank you for being the test pilot with me today, and I really look forward to seeing what happens in real life, your adventures, following them on Facebook and stuff, and then with the festival. So thank you, Jack. I really appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for watching.
Thanks friends out there in improv land. Yeah, thank you, Miki. It was fun.